The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in the market potentially for a starting quarterback this offseason, and one more option just became available today. The Washington Commanders released their former starting quarterback, Carson Wentz. He is now on the open market. He can sign with any team he wants right away. He does not have to wait until the start of the new league year, and this may be a question, at least on some Bucs fans' minds. Will the Tampa Bay Buccaneers be interested in the possibility of bringing in Carson Wentz? Joining me today is my friend and colleague, Mr. Rhett Matthew of the Cannon Fire podcast. Rhett, I hope you are doing well today. What are your initial thoughts on this possibility here?
Thank you, James. I am doing well. My first impressions on the idea of Carson Wentz as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer are probably along the lines of a lot of other people maybe hearing this news. At first, it doesn't sound like a very smart move for the Buccaneers. A lot of people are going to hear the name Carson Wentz, and they're going to look at his struggles in Indy. They're going to look at his last year struggling in Washington under head coach Ron Rivera, kind of battling with Taylor Heineke for that job all year. But he fits all the criteria for exactly the kind of veteran quarterback the Bucs would be looking for. And as far as the age scale, you know what I mean? He's going to be a cheaper option. He's not as young as he used to be. He's been in the league for a number of years, number 2 overall pick in 2016. But, he's a veteran guy who is established. And I think some people may look at and say that he hasn't quite gotten a fair shake as a starter in the NFL. I do think the Colts definitely gave him that opportunity in 2021. And, as far as a career filled with recent rough patches, what he was able to do in Indy in 1 year as a starter, 17 games started, threw for 3,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. But a lot of people obviously remember he really kind of fizzled out at the end of the year there for Philly. And those final few weeks of the season, it was pretty rough to go out there and watch him play. So he can start y'all 17 games. Can he produce in all of them? I don't think so. I think he's proven to us by now during his time in the NFL, he's not the next level starter we all thought he was all the way back in 2016 when he was an MVP candidate the year that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But I definitely think he is an option on the table for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whether fans like to hear that or not.
I think the biggest thing that you worry about with Wentz is one, the semi-mediocre play, right? Wentz hasn't exactly, besides the 1 year, by the way, back in 2017 when that dude was a legitimate MVP candidate and then he got hurt. Don't worry, we'll talk about that in a moment. Wentz has been fine. Like you said, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions back in 2021. In 2022, definitely took a down tick. 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 1,755 yards, got benched after he got hurt. And that's the second thing that you got to consider whenever you think about the possibility of Wentz is this guy gets hurt a little bit. Like you said, Brett, he did play all 17 games back in 2021, but only played in 12 games in 2020. I believe that was also because of a partial benching, if I remember correctly, Rhett, where Doug Peterson had just basically had enough and he was just playing Jalen Hurts at that point. But you also had 2018 where he had sustained an injury. Obviously, 2017, he was playing phenomenal, but then he sustained a very significant injury. And the guy's just struggled to stay healthy throughout his career. That is another issue that is to be brought up. Whenever you compare that to other guys that are out there, like a Jacoby Brissett, like maybe Derek Carr, although there's rumors that he wants $35 million, probably can't afford that, but in the similar price range, you look at a Baker Mayfield, you look at a Jacoby Brissett, you look at a Gardner Minshew, a Taylor Heineke, there are guys out there who can probably put up similar production to Wentz and have more durability. I think that's one of the more important things you got to look at there is the overall durability of Wentz. Now, as you said, former number 2 overall pick, the potential could possibly be there. You do got to question whether or not injuries have taken a very serious toll on Wentz, but I would think that the Buccaneers may at least bring him in on a speculative visit, right? I think that that's a possibility. I mean, there's going to be so many different types of quarterbacks that are going to be linked to the Buccaneers throughout this process, right? That I think that really they're going to explore every single avenue and bring in as many guys as they can just to see what their options are. Is that a fair line of thinking to have?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, the more time goes by, the more we're going to get a feel for how the Bucs are going to approach the quarterback situation. But as of right now, the most likely option is that they're going to do what a lot of people expect, and that's kind of, wait for some of these uncomfortable releases to be made. Guys like Donovan Smith, maybe Leonard Fournette on the chopping block. You save a little bit of money, and then once you work your way through free agency, you prioritize who you want to sign and bring back, then it changes their approach to how aggressive they want to get with a free agent quarterback. Because as of right now, they could obviously still draft. I actually saw a mock draft today that had the Buccaneers moving up in the first round to get Will Levis out of Kentucky. So some of these rookie quarterbacks are obviously still on the table, but as far as the Bucs, using this year as kind of a stopgap year and maybe still potentially seeing what you have in Kyle Trask, I think that's what's going to factor into their decision making of ultimately bringing in a veteran. But just like you said, they're going to keep all their options on the table because there are more and more veteran free agent quarterbacks. I think truthfully though, how aggressive they decide to get with these releases coming up, and especially navigating free agency, who they let walk, who they make an effort to bring back, that's going to tell us a lot about, what kind of quarterback they think they can come out here and get. Because something a lot of people don't seem to understand about free agency quarterbacks this year is that if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers want to make a push to go get a Derek Carr for the expensive price that he has, they can do it. They can get any free agent they want. But the question then becomes, is it going to be worth it? Because if you go after a Derek Carr or another high dollar free agent, you're going to have to potentially mortgage some more pieces of the team towards the future. And that's what they've been doing for the last 3 years. So, guys like Jimmy G, guys like Derek Carr, they're obviously still realistic options for Tampa Bay, but it's going to cost them a lot more. And it's potentially an option that's going to cost them more in 2024, 2025, even 26, when some of these guys already signed to contracts are going to be reaching the end of that. So, if we get a Mike Evans extension, if we get a Chris Godwin extension and a couple of cuts that you didn't see coming, then maybe they're ready to get more aggressive. But I think as of right now, the expectation is one of these fair-priced veteran free agent quarterbacks, and I bring all of that around to say this: Carson Wentz is definitely one of those guys.
Yeah, let me go ahead and get your final thoughts on it. But after I make some points here, is where would you put Wentz in this like ranking of all these available free agent type quarterbacks? Because I don't think the Bucs trade for a quarterback. Maybe they draft a quarterback, but they have so many holes at other positions. They may, like you said, just go the affordable veteran route. For me, you look at guys like Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, though he's had injury concerns of his own as well. I'm not even going to say Lamar Jackson because Lamar Jackson, quite frankly, is not going to be available. Same thing with Geno Smith. But like, for me, like Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, Baker Mayfield, that's probably some of those guys that I would say, okay, I'd rather have them over a guy like Carson Wentz. But like, I wouldn't mind Wentz. Whenever you look at some of those other like kind of lower tier options, I know you're a big Gardner Minshew guy.
Yeah, but so you're telling me you'd take Carson Wentz over Gardner Minshew right now?
I mean, spicy take.
That's a hot take.
Maybe for some people.
I don't know if I was waiting for you to say Gardner Minshew a little earlier because that's my personal favorite free agent option for the Bucs right now. But all right, I'll remember that.
I would kind of, but my point being is that I would have him somewhere in the middle of those available options. Is that fair to say?
I would agree. I would say maybe lower third. I wouldn't quite say middle. I'd say he's one of the not worse options, but definitely lower on the list as far as best available options. Because for Carson Wentz, unfortunately, I know injuries play a huge role, but one, that's already become part of his reputation as a player. And two, quite frankly, after 7 seasons of starting in the NFL, I think you're going to get a general idea of what you can expect from that guy. And I don't think Carson Wentz is at a point in his career where he's going to have this remarkable comeback story in 2 or 3 years where, he comes back and leads a franchise to the playoffs and he's playing like the guy that he was in 2017. I just don't think it can happen. I know you're shrugging. You're a really big Carson Wentz fan over there, and you still got belief in the guy. But I think as far as unfortunately, time not being on his side, we have seen enough of Carson Wentz in his career, and I think we saw him really get a bona fide chance to lead a franchise to the playoffs when he got that job in Indianapolis. So I would say he's one of the lower tier quarterbacks that are available, but I do think he is a legitimate option for Tampa Bay. And one more thing is that, if you're the Bucs and you look at a guy like Carson Wentz, you cannot be oblivious to the injury history. So I think maybe bringing in a guy like Carson Wentz says a little bit more about, how they feel regarding Kyle Trask, because if you sign Carson Wentz, you have to assume your QB2 is going to be playing at some point this season. And that's not really Carson Wentz's fault. That's just his reputation with injuries. And, he's really only started and finished, I think one full NFL season, if not two.
Three.
So you kind of know what to expect with the guy in a sense. And that's, to me, what keeps him lower on the list, because the NFL is a what have you done for me recently league. And, he barely did enough. He barely did enough in Washington to win that starting job. So it's like, he's not my favorite.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. I will say this, just kind of put a bow on this. With Wentz, I think that look, I don't mind Wentz. Is he the top guy on my list? No, he's, again, somewhere in the middle for me. But I wouldn't mind if the Buccaneers brought him in, but I would feel better if they were to bring in Wentz and a rookie, or Wentz and another veteran, and have just kind of a big gumbo type of competition, because like you said, it's tough to rely on Wentz in terms of his overall health right now. So that's the biggest factor for me. If he can stay healthy, and he can be in an offense, maybe like Dave Canales, where you're not putting as much on the quarterback, I would at least be intrigued to see what he could do at the age of 30, right?
And I do think at the end of the day, something the Bucs are also going to be looking for. I kind of hinted at this before, but Carson Wentz, even though he hasn't exactly cut it as a true QB1 in the NFL, he's legitimate competition for a guy like Kyle Trask. You know what I mean? He has the years, just like you said, about 30 years old. He has experience starting for multiple NFL teams. Like, he's been there. And he's been the guy before, and that's the kind of competition you have to bring in for a Kyle Trask. Not to say Baker Mayfield would be less competition for Kyle Trask, but when you look at, the responsibility these guys have had in recent years, seems like Carson Wentz has gotten a little more opportunities than Baker Mayfield, because his time in Carolina, as far as Baker, it came and went pretty quickly. And, we didn't hear a lot about him until he had that last hurrah for the Rams at the end of the season. But, I mean, he's a veteran guy that you look for. And, he's a guy that could probably bring the best out of Kyle Trask early on in the year during training camp.
Well, folks, we'll see. Let us know your thoughts and opinions. Look, I'm not going to be oblivious to this. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who do not want Carson Wentz. But whenever you look at the reality of the situation, like what Rhett was talking about, guys like Carson Wentz, in terms of affordability, are going to be the types of guys that the Buccaneers are looking out for. That's just the way it is, given the cap limitations and whatnot. So there may be some legitimate interest there. We will have to wait and see. But again, let us know your thoughts and opinions about this down in the comments section below. Go check out Rhett's work over at the Cannon Fire podcast. I'm over there on occasion as well, so go give it a listen to. Rhett, thank you again so much for being on this video. It is greatly appreciated. And folks, thank you all so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed. And as always, folks, we will see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.